Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you've ever wondered how money can make or break empires, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into the financial story behind one of history's greatest civilizations, the Roman Empire. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any deep dives into history, economics, and the forces that shaped the world. Imagine standing in the middle of Rome at its height grand temples, bustling markets, armies marching on distant frontiers, and a currency that once seemed unshakable flowing through every corner of the empire. On the surface, it looks like power, stability, and wealth that would last forever. But beneath the grandeur, a hidden crisis was brewing, one that would quietly undermine the empire from the inside. While historians often point to invasions, political corruption, or overextension as causes of Rome's collapse, there was another force at work: money. The empire's economy, once the backbone of its strength, began to falter as coins lost their value, taxes failed to cover rising costs, and debt spiraled out of control. Soldiers were paid with devalued coins. Merchants struggled to keep their businesses afloat, and ordinary citizens saw their savings and livelihoods shrink almost overnight. This was not just an economic inconvenience. It eroded trust, loyalty, and stability across the empire, weakening both the army and society itself. In this video, we will dive deep into the financial mechanisms behind Rome's fall, tracing how the empire's reliance on coinage, repeated debasement of currency, and mounting debt created a perfect storm. By examining the Roman economy at its peak, the process of money creation and debasement, the spiral of inflation and debt, and the resulting impact on the army and population, you'll see that the fall of Rome was not only a story of swords and politics, it was also a story of money losing its power to sustain an empire. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand how economic instability can silently topple even the greatest civilizations. You'll also see why the lessons from Rome remain relevant to the modern world. At its height, the Roman Empire was an economic powerhouse, stretching from Britain to Egypt, from the Atlantic coast to the Persian frontier. Trade flowed across the Mediterranean, connecting bustling port cities like Ostia, Alexandria, and Carthage. Markets were filled with goods from all over the known world: spices, silk, grain, olive oil, and wine. Roads, aqueducts, and ports made transportation efficient, while a complex tax system provided revenue for the state. Taxes came from provinces, citizens, and trade duties. The government also collected tributes from conquered peoples, which initially brought immense wealth to Rome's coffers. Central to all this was the coinage system. Silver denarii and gold aurei were the backbone of commerce. Soldiers were paid in coins, merchants used them for transactions, and taxes were collected in currency. At first, this system worked well because the coins had consistent metal content and intrinsic value. Expansion fueled the economy. More land meant more resources, more tax revenue, and more labor. Mines across Spain, Gaul, and the Balkans produced silver and gold, keeping the coin supply strong. Public spending was high but sustainable, funding armies, infrastructure, public buildings, and grain doles to keep citizens content. Yet, beneath the surface, the empire was starting to feel the strain of overextension. Military costs were rising as legions were stationed across vast borders. Administrative expenses grew as more provinces were added, each with governors, bureaucrats, and support staff. Maintaining roads, aqueducts, and city infrastructure required continuous expenditure. While trade and taxation brought wealth, they could not always keep up with the growing costs. The empire relied heavily on coinage, so any disruption to currency value would ripple through the entire system. Additionally, wealth was unevenly distributed. Elite senators and equestrians accumulated enormous fortunes, while small farmers and urban laborers often struggled. This inequality made the economy more fragile because it concentrated wealth in fewer hands, reducing the resilience of the broader population to economic shocks. It was in this environment of prosperity and strain that the seeds of financial crises were sown. Rome's economy was highly productive, sophisticated, and interconnected, yet it was also vulnerable to mismanagement. Any disruption to trade, currency, or taxation could quickly cascade through society. Actually, at this point, the empire still appeared strong. The army was powerful, the cities were thriving, and Rome's borders were secure. But the combination of rising costs, reliance on and growing inequality meant that the empire's financial system was only as strong as the metal in its coins and the efficiency of its revenue collection. Once those foundations began to weaken, the empire would face challenges that no military might could solve. Understanding Rome's economy at its peak is essential to seeing how a seemingly unstoppable empire could be undermined from within, not by barbarians at the gates, but by the slow erosion of its financial stability. The Roman Empire's financial system relied almost entirely on coinage. Understanding how money was created and manipulated is key to understanding its collapse. In the early empire, coins were minted from silver and gold, giving them intrinsic value. The denarius was a consistent silver coin used for daily transactions, while the aureus was a gold coin for large payments and military salaries. These coins were trusted because of their metal content. However, as the empire expanded, the government faced increasing expenditures, paying legions across vast borders, funding infrastructure, supporting the bureaucracy, and providing public services put pressure on state revenue. The treasury, primarily funded by taxes and tributes, could not always keep pace. To bridge the gap, emperors resorted to debasement. Debasement meant reducing the amount of precious metal in coins while keeping the face value the same. A denarius that was once nearly pure silver might be reduced to 70%, then 50%, and eventually less than 5% silver over a few decades. Debasement allowed the government to mint more coins without increasing tax revenue. This provided short-term liquidity to pay soldiers and officials. But there were consequences. People began to notice that coins were lighter, less valuable, or made from base metals mixed with silver. Merchants raised prices to compensate. Soldiers demanded higher pay, and trust in the currency began to erode. Inflation took hold, creating a feedback loop. Each new round of debasement required more coins to buy the same goods, forcing further debate. By the 3rd century, Roman coins had lost most of their silver content. Daily commerce became increasingly difficult, and barter, or alternative currencies, sometimes replaced official coins in local markets. Confidence in money is essential. When trust in the denarius collapsed, it affected the entire economy. Soldiers became restless. Urban populations struggled, and trade slowed as merchants were unsure of a coin's true value. The empire tried introducing new coins, adjusting denominations, or reforms under emperors like but these solutions were temporary. Overspending and the need for more currency remained. Debasement also had political consequences. Emperors who debased coins to pay armies might win short-term loyalty, but long-term stability suffered. Regional economies began to fragment as confidence in the central coinage declined. Provinces hoarded precious metals, and local markets relied more on barter or foreign coins. By the time Rome faced external pressures, the empire's monetary system had already been weakened internally. Without a stable currency, it became harder to pay troops, fund public works, or maintain trade networks. Money, once a tool of stability and power, had become a source of instability. Understanding debasement shows that Rome's fall was not just military or political, it was economic at its core. Debasement of the coinage led directly to a vicious spiral of inflation and debt. As the silver content of coins decreased, prices rose. Goods that once cost a handful of denarii now required far more. Bread, grain, wine, and clothing all became more expensive. Ordinary citizens saw their savings shrink almost overnight, and merchants adjusted prices frequently to keep up with the changing value of money. This inflation created pressure on the state. Taxes were collected in coin, but as the coins lost value, the real revenue for the government declined. The empire's expenditures, however, did not decrease. Soldiers needed to be paid, bureaucrats needed salaries, and public infrastructure had to be maintained. To cover the shortfall, emperors minted even more coins, further reducing the silver content. This created a feedback loop. Debasement caused inflation, which required more debasement to meet rising obligations. Meanwhile, debt mounted. Provinces were often expected to provide loans or advances to the central treasury, which added strain on local economies. Wealthy elites, who controlled much of the empire's capital, were sometimes called upon to lend money, or they faced forced contributions, further destabilizing social cohesion. Soldiers were particularly affected. Paychecks bought less, leading to unrest and demands for higher salaries. Armies that were once loyal became politically assertive, demanding compensation or even supporting rival claimants to the throne. Economic instability and political instability began to feed each other. Inflation also disrupted trade. Merchants became hesitant to accept debased coins for long-distance transactions. Some regions began using foreign coins or barter for trade, weakening the empire's monetary uniformity. The shortage of reliable currency made it difficult for governors to maintain control over pay for local defenses and ensure economic activity continued. Repeated fiscal crises forced Rome to rely on extraordinary measures such as confiscating property, coercing loans, or debasing coins at unprecedented rates. Each step temporarily solved the problem, but deepened long-term instability. By the 3rd century, the empire faced hyperinflation, mounting debt, and a fragmented economy. Priests soared, the currency lost credibility and confidence in the state. Rome's financial troubles were not just numbers on a ledger, they affected every aspect of life. This spiral of inflation and debt demonstrates that economic collapse can precede military or political failure. Even before the barbarians appeared on the borders, Rome was weakened from within. The economic turmoil caused by debasement, inflation, and debt had profound consequences for Roman society and the army. Soldiers were among the first to feel the impact. Their pay was issued in increasingly worthless coins, reducing their purchasing power. Many struggled to buy basic necessities, creating resentment and lowering morale. Some soldiers turned to looting, while others pledged loyalty not to the emperor but to generals who promised higher pay or rewards. This weakened central control over the military, leading to internal power struggles and civil wars. Ordinary citizens also suffered. Grain prices soared as the denarius lost value, making food unaffordable for the herb-horer. Merchants faced uncertainty as prices fluctuated daily and trust in coinage. Many turned to barter or foreign coins, which fragmented local markets. Public infrastructure suffered as well. Funds that once maintained roads, aqueducts, and public buildings dwindled. Provinces farther from the center saw fewer resources allocated for defense or development. High taxation and forced loans further burdened the population, causing unrest and rebellion in some regions. The economy slowed as trust in money and government waned. Inflation and instability also affected trade. Long-distance commerce became riskier when currencies were unreliable. Suppliers demanded more coin or refused to accept debased money altogether. The interconnected economy of the empire began to fracture, making it harder to sustain large armies or administrative networks. Political consequences followed. Weak emperors struggled to maintain authority as generals, with loyal troops wielded greater influence. Civil wars erupted as factions vied for control, draining resources and further provinces became less secure, and border defenses weakened. External threats became more pressing. Barbarian groups along the Rhine and Danube sensed the empire's vulnerability. With armies stretched thin and poorly motivated, Rome's frontiers were increasingly exposed. Financial instability directly translated into military and political weakness. Society itself was wealth inequality grew, social cohesion declined, and loyalty to the state diminished. Citizens began to lose faith in the government's ability to provide security or prosperity. The combined effects of debased currency, inflation, debt, and mismanagement created a perfect storm. Internal unrest, declining military effectiveness, and social fragmentation left Rome exposed to pressures both within and beyond its borders. In many ways, the empire was hollowing out from the inside long before external invasions sealed its fate. Understanding these consequences highlights that economic failure can cascade into societal collapse, military breakdown, and political disintegration. The fall of Rome offers powerful lessons for modern economies. While we live in a very different financial system today, the underlying principles remain relevant. Stable currency, responsible fiscal management, and public trust are essential to economic and political stability. Rome's debasement of currency illustrates the dangers of inflating money supply to cover government obligations. Excessive printing of money without corresponding economic growth can lead to inflation or hyperinflation, eroding purchasing power and public confidence. Rome also shows the risks of mounting debt. When governments accumulate obligations they cannot meet, it creates a spiral of borrowing, devaluation, and loss of confidence. Citizens, businesses, and even military or civil institutions are affected. Modern economies face similar challenges when debt grows faster than GDP, requiring careful management and long-term planning. Social cohesion is another lesson. Rome's economic crisis amplified inequality and weakened trust in the state. Citizens struggled with rising prices and heavy taxation, leading to unrest. Economic instability today can similarly impact social stability, highlighting the importance of policies that balance growth, fairness, and fiscal responsibility. Military or defense systems are also tied to economic health. Rome's armies were undermined because soldiers were paid in devalued currency. Modern governments rely on economic strength to fund defense, maintain infrastructure, and respond to crises. Weak financial foundations compromise national security, just as they did in ancient Rome. Finally, the importance of public trust cannot be overstated. Rome's citizens and soldiers lost confidence in the currency and the government, accelerating the empire's decline. Modern economies depend on trust in institutions, currency, stability, and transparency. Once confidence erodes, recovery becomes much harder. Studying Rome emphasizes that empires and nations are not brought down solely by external enemies or poor leadership. Financial mismanagement and loss of economic credibility can quietly erode the foundations of power over decades. By understanding how money, debt, and inflation contributed to Rome's fall, modern policymakers and citizens can better appreciate the importance of responsible fiscal management, transparent governance, and stable monetary systems. The story of Rome is a cautionary tale that demonstrates how economic crises, if unchecked, can have consequences far beyond markets. They can undermine societies, weaken armies, and ultimately topple even the mightiest civilizations. The fall of the Roman Empire was not just the result of invading armies or weak emperors. It was a slow unraveling from within, driven by financial mismanagement that touched every part of society. Debased coins, soaring inflation, and mounting debt undermined trust in the government, weakened the army, and fractured local economies. Soldiers became restless. Citizens struggled to survive, and provinces felt abandoned. By the time external pressures arrived, the empire was already fragile, its foundations eroded by economic instability. The lesson is clear. Money is more than a tool for trade. It is the backbone of trust, loyalty, and power. When a currency loses value and confidence fades, even the mightiest empire can collapse. Rome reminds us that economic stability is inseparable from political strength, military readiness, and social cohesion. Modern nations may have more sophisticated financial systems, but the principles remain the same. Responsible fiscal management, stable currency, and public trust are essential to sustaining power and prosperity. History shows that when these fail, the consequences ripple far beyond markets, reaching into the very structure of society itself. By understanding Rome's money crisis, we gain not only insight into the past, but a warning for the present. The health of an economy shapes the fate of civilizations.